Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Straight Talk on Stocks. My name is Jeffrey Dunyan. I am the owner and founder of Safe Option Strategies, and joining me, as always, is Kevin Hurley, managing partner of Hurley Investments, LLC. We are just a couple of guys that understand the markets, know the economy, know what's happening, know what's causing things to happen, and we're going to give you the straight, no BS talk on how it all works and how it all affects you. We're going to mix in some politics, we're going to mix in some sports. Occasionally, we are just going to talk about what our kids or our wives have done recently to piss us off. Enjoy another episode of Straight Talk on Stocks.
All right, here we are. What's today? January 4th, Friday. Big Friday. Big stuff going on. Dow Jones Industrial Average up over 750 points at one time this morning. Jerome Powell with his two, what would you call them? His two partners in crime, Yellen and Bernanke, having some kind of a little round table or panel or interview or something and making big headlines and making the market move. I got to start out talking about yesterday. What was going through your mind when we were selling off 660 points yesterday, which no longer seems like a massive earth-shaking deal, does it?
It doesn't, but anytime your S&P sells off like 2.78%, you sit there and you're just like, holy Toledo, what's happening? Because the markets were never intended to move that way. And I'll be honest with you, part of me thought we'd come into this year and we had our sell-offs and we were done. Part of me thinks that we're nowhere close to being done, and we're going to keep having this volatile market through the first 6 months of 2019.
I'd like to believe we're not going to, but I have a hard time thinking otherwise. It's scary to me that days like yesterday are starting to feel like the new norm. They're starting more and more to feel like that's what we should be expecting, is these 1.5 to 2.5 to sometimes 3% moves in a day. And that's really, really, that's unnatural. That's not the way the markets were ever intended to move.
No.
Not that much in a day.
But I'll be honest with you, I kind of expected yesterday's movements today. I thought dummy Powell was going to screw it up today and we'd be doing this today. I'm kind of shocked for our rebound.
Did you hear what he said? The gist of what he said that got things going in the right direction?
Can I say I call BS?
Well, what did I say yesterday? You know how you can tell if they're BSing you? It's because their lips are moving. I'm looking at. Okay, so back up and what caused the markets to sell off massively when they made the rate hike. Everything they did on the day that they announced that rate hike was exactly what the markets were expecting, was it not? We were expecting a 0.25% move up.
It was. They were expecting a rate hike. Again, it was Powell's comments, and he's a horrible communicator. He is awful. He says exactly what the market doesn't need to hear. And he's an economist. I mean, again, I talk about economists that I know, and most of what comes out of their mouth is voodoo crap. And
you've heard this before, right?
Telling us nothing in that hour, but we'd feel okay with it.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the Greenspan days, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that what Alan Green? I heard someone ripping on Alan Greenspan about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. I heard someone talking about Alan Greenspan being the worst Fed chair that we've ever had. And all I could think is Alan Greenspan could talk for an hour and no one knew what the Fed was going to do next. No one had any idea what the plan was. No one knew anything was going to be different in the next day, the next week, the next month, the next quarter. No one knew. Greenspan could talk for an hour and sound intelligent and never say anything at all. And we went from that to Bernanke, who wanted this spirit of transparency. Let's usher in this new era of transparency. So let's have this stream of consciousness of every stupid thing that comes into my mind. Let me just blurt it out and say it to the public so I'll panic people all the time. Then you had Janet Yellen, who couldn't fill a thimble with the brain matter that she's got between her ears. And now you've got Powell, who he seems to be a smart guy, and I don't even think he is necessarily doing the wrong thing, with an exception. I'll tell you in a second. I think there's an exception to that, but I don't think he's doing everything wrong. But it's like you said, he's a horrible communicator. He did exactly what we wanted him to do, or what we expected, not necessarily what we wanted, because there's a difference. What happened a couple weeks ago when the Fed raised rates, people floated too much possibility of the Fed doing something different than what they did. So you've got your analysts, your experts, your talking heads are agreeing that they're going to raise rates 0.25%, and that they're going to back off to only 2 rate hikes for 2019 tentatively. Those aren't guaranteed, but tentatively only 2 rate hikes in 2019. That's exactly what they said they would do. But the problem is he didn't need to say anything about the balance sheet. He didn't need to say anything about getting things off their books. And instead, that's where all the focus went. That's what every single media person, every person on TV, every person on the radio, they went right to those comments and said, this is doomsday. He's lowering the balance sheet too quickly. He doesn't need to do it that fast. And if he wants to continue to do it that fast, then he should have said, we decided not to raise rates, or we're not making any commitment on any rate hikes for 2019. So you're right.
Jeff,
he communicated it horribly.
Let's be honest, right? I've loved everything President Trump has done, and I've hated the way he's done it.
Okay, fair enough.
I agree with Powell. More quivers in the air, more arrows in the quiver to be able to shoot down high inflation, slow economy, unemployment. For the most part, I've agreed with what he's done. I think he's gone overboard and he's kind of out of touch with the economy at right now. But I've hated every single thing that's coming out of the guy's mouth. Even today, I felt he just doesn't get it. He's saying a narrative. I'm glad the market's appreciating it. But in all honesty, I think it's our average work week numbers that came through, the non-farm payrolls that are moving our markets today, not necessarily Powell and Yellen and Bernanke and what was said, to be honest with you. In fact, most of what they said was how crappy economists are and how they're trying to create ways to improve the profession of being an economics major and economist so that more women and minorities can be part of that industry. And I chuckled because they're there to give us some insight on the Fed's plan for the next 3 to 6 months. I don't know. It was painful to listen to this morning. That's what I'm going to tell you.
I'll tell you this. I'll add to that. It bothers me a lot how much the Fed, I don't know if the word controlling is the right word, but how much the markets are responding to what the Fed is saying and doing. I'm not saying there should be no correlation. I'm not saying that the raising of interest rates or the lowering of interest rates shouldn't have any impact on what the market is doing. It concerns me a lot how big these moves are over what I think are one little piece to the puzzle, not an unimportant piece, not a, I'm not trying to diminish the importance of what the Fed is doing. It just bugs me that, a comment by Powell clarifying what he meant to say 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, what I meant was we'll be patient. We'll be more, we'll take a look at everything. And there's no guarantee we're going to do this or this or this. Well, why didn't you say that 2 weeks ago, number one? And number two, why has the market got to react so big to these little comments by the Fed? It concerns me. It concerns me because it's getting harder and harder and harder to trade the markets. You were telling me something earlier about the difference between last year and 2008 or more, even don't even go to all of last year, last quarter.
Yeah, let me make the comment.
Yeah.
Last year was my toughest or hardest year in the market in the last 12. That includes 2008. It was easier to trade, to invest, to protect in 2008 when, in my opinion, we didn't know what was going on. We kind of found out after the fact. But the market movements were more sustainable, more prolonged. What a wild market we live in right now. What weird volatility and swings we see. And I'll be honest with you, we had consecutive flash crashes and down days where you had a week in one direction. It wasn't down 600 one day, up 700 the next. It's really, boy, this is tough to sit through and tough to find a direction to make any money in this market. It's last year was flat. Flat is the toughest market to be in because you're assuming new things will happen that never occur.
I don't even know if flat is the toughest. It's flat when the high range and the low range are off of each other by 10 to 12%. Flat to me, flat to me is when you're going steadily up just a tiny bit, but not up in any dramatic way, or you get up a little bit, you have a pullback. You get up a little bit, you have a pullback. This is these wild intraday swings. I mean, two days ago, the market finished up 18, 20 points on the Dow and had been down at 350 down early in the day. And that's becoming a new norm to some respect, is that intraday, we're seeing these moves on a regular basis of 300 to 400 to 500 points. And that's what feels like the new norm. Here's what I saw in 2008 that was so different, because there's already so many people making the comparison. This is like 2008. This is like how we led into 2008. End of 2018 is just like the end of 2007 was. And okay, here's what I see as the big difference. In 2008, in the market, the bear market we saw in 2008, what did the three major indexes give up? 45, 50, and 47% respectively, or somewhere in that range.
Like 46, S&P was 38.
So S&P wasn't quite as bad. One of them is Dow or NASDAQ was down just almost 50. If it wasn't 50, it was close to it. So you've got these three major indexes all down in that range of 40 to 50%. But there were underlying fundamentals in the market that were driving that. There were reasons why. A person with or without an expensive degree, with or without an expensive title behind their name, a person could read the news, they could listen to the news, and there was a little bit more news, a little bit less opinion, and there was news supporting the sell-off. There were reasons for it. You didn't always have to agree with the reasons, but there were underlying fundamental reasons for the sell-off.
Harder to trade a tweet, isn't it? Harder to trade a data news. Harder to trade a blurb, a headline that comes across on the internet. It's just shocking what is real news, what's fake news, what should move the market, what shouldn't. Everything's moving it right now.
Look at this headline right here. For the audio only people, I'll read it. The second headline on CNBC's website right now: Fed Chief Jerome Powell says he would not resign if Trump asks. Okay, all right. I suppose that's newsworthy, right?
Sure.
Here's my question for you. Alan Greenspan, go back to the Alan Greenspan days. Go back to the early days of Bernanke. Any reporter going to ask, what would you do if Bush wants to fire you? What would you do if Obama wants to fire you?
More importantly, how much do you think this podcast will move the markets today?
Yeah, exactly. They didn't get asked those questions because reporters were not trying to be the news and make the news. Reporters were reporting on the news.
Good point.
Reporters were reporting on the news instead of trying to make the news. I would have loved if space-time travel, if we could have Star Trek technology and I could beam to somewhere, I would love to stand behind the guy that asked Jerome Powell that question. And as he started to ask that question, just a nice firm slap upside the back of his head saying, shut up, moron. You don't need to ask that question. You don't need to try to make the news here.
So I'm going to say this tongue in cheek. I spent a little bit of time living in Brazil. And in all honesty, it was quite hilarious because for all intents and purposes, they make up the news there. They're third world. They don't report on anything that's important. They make up the news, shoot from the hip as they're there. It's hilarious. How did we move to that kind of third world mentality here in the United States?
Well, it's a combination of things. When earlier today, before we started the podcast, you and I were talking about what were we talking? We were talking about a whole bunch of stuff. We were talking about news a little bit. We were talking about I can't remember now. We were talking about something political. How did we get to this point? We were talking about the instant news cycle. That's what it was. Did you like how I fumbled around trying to remember what we were talking about just a little while ago?
Yes, but you got more quicker than I did.
We were talking about the instant. Well, that's because you were trying to follow me as I was babbling and stammering like an idiot. We were talking about the instant news cycle, and even though the internet is not a new thing, it's not like we got the internet last week. It's not like we got the internet when Trump came into office. But go back to the beginning of the previous administration, or even go back farther than that to the administration prior to that. Go back to when Bush won office the first time. You had 24-hour news. You had 24-hour media. What was absent was the social media. Social media has caused the more traditional mainstream media to try and look for ways to keep up and to be as sensational. If I'm a reporter at ABC and all I'm doing is reporting on the news and I'm not giving you an opinion, I'm not trying to sway you, I'm not trying to sensationalize it, then I pale in comparison to the president's tweets that he's putting out. George Bush never had to deal with tweets. Not until the very end of his 8 years in office did Obama have to deal with a lot of tweeting. And then Trump comes along and he tips the political world up on its head in terms of tweeting. And so I don't know. It's natural that the market is reacting to it. I just think the market is overreacting to it. Tell me again what you were saying when we were talking earlier today about you were comparing the stock market to to little kids, not specifically your kids or my kids, but to little kids in general.
Yeah. So they're my kids. So the stock market are my kids right now. In an effort to be transparent, the news has muddied the waters, and the stock market acts like one of my kids. Give it so. I don't like it. What am I trying to say here? Sorry, it's a little pause.
Yeah, I'm losing you. I video and audio has just about gone out. You gotta
this.
I'm losing everything you're saying right now, Kevin. You might have to try and jump out and jump back in. All right. Well, we'll let Kevin get things figured out on his end with his audio and video. He's got to call his internet provider and see if he can't light them up a little bit. And you're slowly fading back into existence. You got audio back? Yeah, I still can't hear anything. All right. Some other headlines. I love this. This absolutely kills me. It's impossible for me to not get political on stuff. Here's another headline that's just fantastic. Trump rages about impeachment talk as Democrat leaders play down the issue. I'm curious on this. Trump rages about it, but from what I understand, it was a couple of moron bozo Democrats who, after getting sworn in yesterday for this next term in the House, immediately had articles of impeachment ready to go. How is it that Democrats are downplaying the issue when they're the ones bringing articles? It's not Republicans that are bringing articles of impeachment. This kind of stuff is affecting the markets as well. I heard something interesting. I was listening to Elizabeth McDonald on Fox Business News yesterday. I like Elizabeth McDonald. She's sharp. She impresses me with the way she breaks down and analyzing things. And Elizabeth, I'm not saying that just so that you'll invite me onto your show. I'm really not. But she was pointing out that you cannot ignore some of what's gone on in the market recently, and some of what has gone on since the elections in November, and some of what has gone on more specifically as the new House of Representatives was getting sworn into office yesterday. You cannot ignore the fact that the markets took off and soared just on Trump getting elected and getting into office, and that the markets really faltered bad after an October sell-off that was kind of expected. It was worse than expected, but it was kind of expected. After a worse than expected October sell-off, everyone thought November was going to be the rebound month, because October is kind of typical for October to be a bad month. So everyone is looking and thinking, okay, November will be a rebound month. And then the Democrats took back control of the House of Representatives by some bigger margins than what were originally expected. That was the news. Wasn't that they took over the House. The news was that they picked up more seats than people expected. I don't know if it was a landslide, but it certainly wasn't good for Republicans. You cannot discount that in the equation of what the market has done since. If you leave that out of the equation and try to pretend that everything that has happened with the markets has nothing to do with that, you're living with your head buried at least partway in the sand. Because what have they been, Maxine Waters, just today, she said again, she wants to roll back all of these regulation cuts that Trump has made. Why did the markets react so favorably to Trump's election even before he took office and started doing anything? Why did they react so favorably? Because people knew that Trump was going to slash regulations. Well, look, the reality is Maxine Waters by herself in her committee, even with the Democrat House of Representatives, they can't undo any of what Trump has done. None of it. They can't undo one single solitary thing, because any piece of legislation they move forward is either going to get stopped in the Senate or it's going to get vetoed by Trump. That's what gridlock is. That's the very definition of gridlock. Two different parties in control of different seats in Washington, D.C., or different branches in Washington, D.C., and nobody can get anything done. And that's a good thing. But it's just this notion that Democrats are coming into office saying all they want to do is screw up everything that Trump has done. I mean, they're telegraphing it.
Makes you proud to be an American, huh?
They're like, here's what Democrats are. They just got the lead. They just got the lead for the first time in the game. And they're like a football team that's now going in to prevent defense with 5 minutes left in the game. Let's let the other team continue to throw 10 and 15-yard passes without any defense to stop and do it. We're just not going to give up the big play down the field. They're telegraphing what they're going to do. They got the lead, and now they're going to throw it away by stopping any common sense or law. Well, not that they ever had it to begin with, but it kills me. And so, I see a headline that, Trump is all enraged about impeachment talk. Well, he's not the one talking about impeachment. The Democrats are. And I'm telling you, that's exactly what we need in the country. That is exactly what we need, is a bitter, out of power party that just barely got a little teeny bit of the pie they got back. And now they're going to act like they own the room. That's what we need. That'll help.
Yeah, it's not going to help. I don't know. It's when it comes down to it, Jeff, I'm shocked at how neither party or the new Tea Party, how none of them seem to really be in touch with America, conservative America, middle class America right now. It's all these new ideas, these new expectations, these new thought processes. In fact, I think we're moving so far towards socialism, and we're too stupid to realize you can go to 40 some odd countries and find out it's never worked, because eventually you run out of other people's money. But somehow it's going to be different this time.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, you and I could do show after show after show. We could do podcast after podcast after podcast just talking about politics. And the only thing we're ever going to do is agree with each other that politics, and it's not just Democrats and it's not just Republicans. And what kills me is that people get so entrenched on a side that they stop recognizing that the problem is Washington, D.C., period. It is the cesspool of corruption and money. You say politicians are out of touch with middle America. every 2 years, we get a handful of new people elected, Democrats or Republicans. You get a handful of new people elected, and they've come from a very average middle-class background. They come from a very average, down to earth. I can relate to the common folk. I can relate to the red, what do they call it? The flyover states, the red states that make up middle America, or I really understand the plight of the people in the inner city that are struggling with not enough money and not enough jobs. So whichever political party they're coming out of, they're the candidate that didn't grow up with any kind of circumstance or privilege, and they can relate to everybody. And then what happens when they go back to Washington, D.C.?
Well, they're part of the most net worth of $350,000 that after 3 or 4 terms, he's now worth what, $70 million?
They're all of a sudden they're part of the most elite class of people in the country because we have allowed them to become the most elite class of people because we've allowed the kind of money to influence politics the way it does. It is a cesspool. You've got people that go back there, and I think a lot of them get elected and they're well-intentioned, but as soon as they're there, everything they wanted to do to help people in their district, to help their constituents, goes out the window, and they all have the same goal. Get power, keep power. That's it. Stay in power. All I need to do I've been elected. Now, all I'm going to do is hold my finger up to the political wind and ask the question, what's going to get me reelected? What can I do right now today that has the greatest chance of getting me reelected? Lie, steal, cheat, sell myself, sell my soul to the devil, take a bribe here, let someone take me on a vacation there, let someone put me up in their expensive apartment. I'll find ways to get it around the rules. I'll make sure it sort of loosely, generally sort of fits within this whole rule thing that we have on ethics. But my number one goal is to keep power and keep getting reelected. Yeah. I despise, this, I've told you this many times, I despise career politicians. I don't care what side of the political aisle they're on. I despise career politicians. You should have one opportunity for a maximum of 8 to 10 years to make money off of my tax dollars. Then you should never be allowed in politics ever again at any level higher than casting a vote. That's the only thing you should be able to do for the rest of your life is cast a vote in your local elections. 10 years in Washington, D.C., you should be banned from even entering the city. It'll never happen.
Dow just hit 800 points.
Yeah, I'm seeing on your TV behind you. I'm seeing that it hit 800. Crazy day. Anything else going on today? Volume is starting to pick back up.
Hold it, and I think next week is kind of going to be a big week. Next week, as I look forward, it's one of those middle of the row weeks. Some big quote unquote economic reports, factory orders, ISM services on Monday, consumer credit on Tuesday,
last week
minutes on Wednesday. Let's see what they're really thinking behind closed doors, what they don't tell us, so to speak.
The first and the last full trading week just ahead of the next earnings season. And banks reporting the following week, starting on the 14th, 15th, 16th, when all the big banks and big financial institution report. That to me is going to be a little more. This upcoming week, I'm going to give you my prediction for the week. This upcoming week, I think is going to be a little bit, dare I say, a little bit tepid. I think everyone's going to sit back a little, not that we can't have some big moves, but I think there's going to be some caution. I think people are going to kind of sit back and wait. I think you'll see some big money moving back into some bigger companies. Some of these companies have gotten really beat up, but they're still good, strong companies. You might see a little more money moving back into them. I don't think it's going to be a sudden influx, but it's the week after that when banks begin to report. And we start getting that sense of where the next earnings season might go. That's when
don't forget, next week is a huge mudslinging week. House passed their budget, and it's going to come out press conferences on Monday. Oh, Republican Senate won't pass a budget. Oh, it'll get vetoed by Trump. it's going to be a mudslinging week in politics because the House believes they have a fair and just budget to open up the 7 or 9 branches of government. I'll wait till September, except for the defense or Homeland Security is only going to be till February. But watch the news headlines, push the market around. It's a mudslinging week, I bet.
Yeah, let me ask you this, is there such a thing in Washington, D.C. as a week that's not a mudslinging week anymore?
Well, no, but Pelosi's now the House Speaker, and with all due respect, she is one of the king mudslingers ever, and she's now in power again. So
yeah,
just watch the childish bickering between those politicians right now, and I think we're going to have more volatility, more VIX in the 25 to 30 range. It's just going to be pathetic to listen to and watch.
Yeah, well, it always is. Last comment, and then I'm going to sign off. This is a direct message. If anybody gets this message and can get it to Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper, you want out of Washington, D.C. That place is a cesspool. I promise you want to get out of there. The weather is better in L.A. The fans are better in L.A. Come to L.A. and be a Dodger. They freed up the cap money to get you. California, is it California where he's from? Can't remember all of a sudden.
I don't remember. I don't know.
I think he's from California. Bryce, come to LA. The Dodgers want you, and there's no place you would rather be. You got to get your family away from Washington, D.C. It's going to ruin them. It's going to corrupt them. That's the last thing I'll comment on.
I like it. Have a good week. See you next week.
And I hope as the playoffs start in the NFL that every single NFL team can find a way to lose. I hope that every game can end 0-0 without any player being able to perform. Because as long as Roger Goodell is the commissioner of the NFL, I hope the league just goes completely to pot.
All right, then.
Take a knee on that, spoiled NFL players. Okay. See you, man.
Have a good one. Talk to you later.